Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anyone that wants to start, grow, or develop a solo performing career. I have over 50 years of experience playing live, and will include not only my tips, but other hardworking pros in their arenas and their part of the world. The hope is to make this actionable and fun and give you some information you can use to help develop your own act. If you like what we do, don't forget subscribe and share the podcast. Let's get busy. Today, I have an international superstar on the line, Mr. Mike Masse. Mike, welcome.
Thanks. Hi, Riley.
One of the things that I mentioned earlier, as I said, is I got turned onto your channel by a friend of mine from Utah named Lynn Eldridge. And as I said, I've been to Pie Pizzeria before, and I didn't know that they had entertainment, so that's pretty cool. But let's back up even further than that. First of all, where does the Mike Masse story begin? Where are you originally from and all of that?
Well, I was born in Virginia. My dad worked for the federal government, civilian, but he was he was a seismologist, so he was helping the government distinguish between underground nuclear testing by the Soviets and earthquakes. And so I was born in Falls Church, Virginia. He was working up in DC, and then we moved down to Florida, near Cocoa Beach, a place called Satellite Beach. And he was working at Patrick Air Force Base at that point, still a civilian, and retired as a civilian. But he was doing a lot of traveling, and so that was kind of his thing. And I'd give him lists of albums that I wanted him to bring back with me when he would travel. He was super nice about it. He had 5 kids, but he'd always try to stop by a record store when he could, just to kind of give me something to look forward to when he came back from his trips and such. And so he started with a list of Kiss albums, and then it went to gravitated into Rush albums. And I grew up listening to the Beatles a lot because my mom and my sisters were way into classic rock and still are. My mom's big Clapton fan, Neil Diamond, that kind of thing. And my sisters got into the Beatles. I had 3 older sisters, and they each had a favorite Beatle. Actually, John was the only one that wasn't a favorite of one of my sisters. So, sorry, John. Yeah, I know, right? And so a lot of music in the house. We had a piano that my sisters all took lessons, and kind of, sort of largely got ignored, and I started kind of tinkering at it and figuring stuff out by ear. And my mom's like, maybe he's the one who needs piano lessons. And
How old were you when this happened, Mike? Pardon me for interrupting.
Oh, probably I don't know, 5 or something. I mean, it was pretty young.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Yeah, I started lessons pretty young because I kind of she could tell I had sort of at least an ear for it, if not an aptitude. So I started piano lessons, and that was just a few years, enough to kind of give me a working basic knowledge of theory. I never, developed into an amazing classical player or anything, but I kind of could work my way around rock songs pretty well. And then I picked up an acoustic. Actually, I got an electric guitar early on, and then I just something from the Sears catalog, $100 with an amp, for Christmas one year. And I was doing, like everyone else does, I was doing Iron Man power chords, or Crazy Train, or whatever Rush riffs I could figure out. And so that was kind of my introduction to guitar. And then I kind of put it aside, and then when I was in high school, I got an acoustic guitar. I got my first. It was a Celebrity Applause by Ovation, what everybody else had, right? Exactly. And fast forward, I'm now sponsored by Ovation, so I've kind of gone full circle on that. And so now they're building me guitars with my name on it, which is super, super cool. And I just the little kid in me, every time I think about that, I'm like, that's so cool.
Well, it's interesting. I'm actually an Ovation player too. We'll circle around in that probably in the second part of the podcast. Sure. So that's fantastic.
No worries.
So acoustic guitar, when you did that, did it kind of change your approach to the instrument?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because it changed my it definitely changed my repertoire. I was gravitating, I bought a couple of big old it was kind of Beatles complete sheet music books, volumes 1 and 2, and I'd either use them for piano or guitar, whatever. But it wasn't tab. It didn't tell you how to play it. It just told you what the notes were that you were hearing, and you kind of as a guitarist, you kind of had to figure it out from there. And so I remember the first time I tried to learn Blackbird, I basically learned how to finger pick guitar by listening to the Beatles and playing along. And so it was Blackbird, Rocky Raccoon, and Yesterday. That was my assignment for myself, basically. And then eventually Dear Prudence, I kind of branched out a little bit, but that was kind of how I learned to play, or finger picking style. And I'm still not great at it, but I'm better than some, I guess, apparently. But Blackbird, I learned it, and I was doing it by ear. And initially I was I learned it, all the right notes, but kind of in the wrong position. I was using my pinky and doing this reach that wasn't there. I'm just oh, okay. because that's the tricky thing about guitar, right? The same note could be played in so many different places. And then you introduce a capo, forget about it. Like, it's like, it could be anything, right? And so for me, it was, just playing by ear, but without guidance. I didn't have a guitar teacher at that point. And so I figured out a lot of stuff right, and I kind of got it. And, I had blisters on my thumb from all that, finger picking with the thumb, just like, I remember that vividly. And then the other thing I would do, I kind of got together with some friends. We had a band in like junior high, like ninth grade into high school, just a cover band. We were called Infrared. We were doing the 80s stuff, and it was fun. We do some older stuff too, so it's still kind of classic rock. But I got like a DX7, which was a synthesizer, and my dad, like, took out a second mortgage on the house to get me a synthesizer. Not true, but like, it was a sacrifice. And I remember, like, the Yamaha DX7 was the most popular selling keyboard of all time. And at that point, they were like in super high demand. It was before like they had established that as the highest selling, because they couldn't keep them in stock. And so I literally like borrowed the DX7 from the local Pro Sound music store in Boulder, Colorado. I borrowed their DX7 until mine showed up, because I'd already paid for it, which was super cool. And so like, my first gig in a band was our ninth grade going away party, and I played it on a borrowed DX7.
Let me pause for just a second,
Sure.
because a lot of folks in here that are younger than you and I won't remember this. I moved to Los Angeles in March of 1983 to attend the Guitar Institute of Technology. GIT,
Nice.
right? It
Nice.
changed the year that I was there. The name changed to Musicians Institute. When I got to town, the DX7 had just been introduced at the late '82 NAMM show, and people were trying to sell those things in the black market for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
Right.
I did a gig with a guy after I graduated in '84, and all he brought to the gig was the DX7 and about 6 or 7 of those little cards. And Mike, he would swap them in and out for every song and was just killing. And of course, the DX7 changed the game for keyboard players. Previously, you had to have a Hammond organ. You had to have either a Wurlitzer or an electric, some sort of electric piano. You had to have a synth. You had to have a string machine. And all of a sudden, you could do all that with one machine. So people that don't understand, the DX7 really helped change the music business in the 1980s.
That's fair. That's fair. And it was kind of like,
because you played it, right? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was really cool. Like, it was even a different, like, kind of synthesis technology, like a digital they called FM, like frequency modulation, instead of the traditional, ADSR. Yeah. So it's pretty cool, and it was really fun. And I was just kind of like, it was my dream to be a musician, but I didn't really like think I would ever do it professionally. I kind of, I thought it'd be cool to do it professionally, but I didn't really think it was going to happen. But I didn't really, there wasn't, so in my mind, I was like, I'm going to become a recording engineer. That's what I thought. I'm like, I'm just going to go work in a studio. Like, I want to be around music, even if I'm not like performing, that's cool. I want to live my life around music. And so I went to college and got trained as a recording engineer. I graduated from BYU in Provo, Utah. And I realized right away, like, there was a really good studio nearby. I think it's called Pinnacle or something. And they had like the new, I think it's Euphonics board, the digital board and everything. It was like kind of like when that was starting to kind of happen. And so they had like the latest tech, but they didn't want to pay me. They just wanted me to like work for free as an intern. I'm just like, I can't do that. I need a job. And so I kind of like, then I just went and worked at a record store. And I'm like, I'm going to go to law school. And so I went to law school.
Can I pause you for just a second? Because one of the things that we need to address is your voice.
Okay.
My wife has fallen in love with your voice. And as I think most of your prodigious audience, over 160 million hits on YouTube the last time I counted, and you have a tremendous voice. Were you singing in choirs like in middle school or high school, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like just whatever you hear now is the product of training and practice, because I was not a natural born singer. Like, I sucked. I sucked. No, I was bad. Like, it was just like, it was not good. Like, I had a basic tone, but just like, I just didn't have the breath support. I didn't have, my range wasn't what it was. It was just like, I mean, I had I had a pleasant tone, but it wasn't like what it is now. Right. And so, I started off in ninth grade. Like, I told you that DX7 gig with my 4 bandmates, we rehearsed all the music. Then we're kind of like, we look around, like, we got like a week to go before the gig. They're like, okay, we got all the music down. so who's gonna sing? It's just like we just like it was like an afterthought, you know. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we need a singer. It was just kind of stupid, but that's the way we approached it. And so we actually kind of divvied up the songs, everybody but the guitar player, but we all kind of took a few, you know. And I got the hard ones. I got freaking like New Year's Day by U2, and I got like Tom Sawyer by Rush. I'm like, come on, guys. And so there was a lot of like weak falsetto happening that day, but yeah, it was that was my first gig, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But they kind of threw me in the role as the front man, if you will, or at least the lead singer. And so I kind of developed more. And we started doing originals. And actually, like one of the things that was encouraging to me was when I was in 11th grade, I think it was. There was a songwriting, like a local high school Battle of the Bands contest for original songs. It was KPKE in Denver, and so you'd submit songs that you'd recorded as your local band, your high school band, and then they'd play them on the radio, and then they just kind of at the end they voted on which one was the best. And we had a song called "Homeward Bound," no relation to the Simon and Garfunkel song.
Yes.
That I had written and I'd sang, and we had like a kind of decent home recording of it. We again Yamaha like cassette 4-track. We invested as a band, you know. We also got an SPX 90. That was our effects unit, you know. So like we had a little bit of reverb, you know, and that was our budget, and that was it. You know, we were just doing this as high school kids. It was pretty impressive, like to think back on it. But anyway, so I got to hear my voice on the radio singing "Homeward Bound," and I'm walking around high school, and the kids are like, "Hey, I heard you on the radio. That's cool." You know, like, and I was like, I could get used to this. This is kind of cool. You know, just like getting a little bit of acknowledgement from my peers for my musical abilities. And I remember a friend of mine, the guy who played bass on it, Ken Benson, he said, his brother told him, it's like, Mike has one of the best, you know, lower voices I've ever heard. You know, like he liked the sound of my lower range. I'm like, oh, okay. Like maybe I have a, you know, distinctive voice to some people's ears. Okay. So like I kind of filed that back in my head. And then, in high school, I was kind of a late bloomer, but I joined a couple of choirs, just like my last 2 years of high school. One of them was an after school men's chorus thing. And then I did like the festival choir. I wasn't in like the best choir. I didn't audition for anything like that. I just did the big festival choir in high school, which was fun and gave me a lot of, you know, like understanding of singing with other people and, you know, even kind of reading sheet music a little bit, because I wasn't, you know, the best sheet music reader. I got better in college because I went on to be a music major at BYU, and so I had to, you know, read music obviously. But so yeah, that was kind of how that evolved, and then I started taking voice lessons in college, and that's when things really started to click for me. And I took 2 tracks of voice lessons, and I actually credit them equally. One was my legit kind of, well, when I say legit, I mean legit, like in the strictest sense, like legit singing, like classical singing. With an opera teacher, you know, an opera professor that was amazing, a guy named Clayton Robinson, huge baritone voice, you know, big barrel chested dude. I'm just like, whoa, that's awesome. And I just love listening to him sing and demonstrate. I'm just like, that was cool. I can't do that, but that was cool, you know. And then I took kind of on the side at my own expense, I took what was called belt pop lessons. Which is kind of like musical theater singing lessons from a graduate student in the music dance theater department. And she was learning belt singing from Jan Sullivan, who literally wrote the book on belt singing and who's based out of Hawaii, but she I don't know, she had some connections to BYU. And so I kind of learned about this early on. I'm just like, oh, that's a whole different thing. It's like the support system's the same, but like the vowel modulations and the placement, it's just like a whole different ballgame. So that just kind of experimenting with those 2 different sounds kind of just gave me more familiarity with my voice. And so it gave me more tools and more colors that I could use, you know, whatever the situation required. You know, if I needed to be singing in church or whatever, I could do something more, you know, proper sounding. And then if I needed to, you know, rock it out or, you know, sing something high, you know, or screechier, you know, I remember in our in my vocal lessons in college, we literally did Piano Man. That was one of the songs we worked on because Billy Joel's placement it was kind of what she called pop legit. It wasn't full like a belt focused sound, but it was kind of had some belt vowel modulations, you know, so it was kind of a hybrid. And so that was explained to me, this is what he's doing. It's kind of like it's taking from this world and it's taking from this world and he's got this sound. And so that kind of, you know, and now I open my shows lately with Piano Man. I play it on guitar and harmonica, you know, and percussion with my feet, but I'm singing Piano Man now and people love it. And it's just you know, when you make that octave jump and, you know, he says, son, can you play me? You know, when you go up there,
yes.
It wakes up the room. They're like, oh, okay. You know, there's a voice coming out now. Like, okay.
Well, when you do Piano Man, people understand this requires somebody that's got some ability to be a singer. And clearly you do. So let me ask you a question. So you're playing in the band in junior high school or middle school and high school. You get to college. Were you doing any shows while you were in college, or just focusing on the academic? And how did that go?
Yeah. Yeah. I had kind of, yeah, I had a lot of fun gigging in college. It started off as like, it literally built from like, it reminds me of that scene in Yellow Submarine when like there's the ensemble that's getting killed by the blue meanies one by one. They're like, quintet, sir, quartet, sir, trio, sir. Like it's going, the ensemble's getting smaller as each of them is getting killed by the blue meanies or whatever, or, turned into whatever they were. So like I did the opposite. I started as solo, and then it was duo, and then it was trio, and then I'm like a band. And so I started off. I auditioned at a local restaurant called The Underground, and they had a little stage, and they had live music. I'd been there to eat. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. And they had a piano on stage, and it was like upright, and just just a little thing in the corner. It was like literally underground, it was. And so I auditioned there, and like they liked it, and I'm like, okay, cool. And that gave me a little bit of confidence. I started developing a set list. Like I had lists that I passed out, so they could circle what songs I knew, and it kind of grew. And eventually, there's 100 songs on there, and I started take songs off. So I keep the list about 100, so it could be one page, and I just pass out to the tables. They bring it back circled and with tip money or whatever, and or a dedication written on or whatever. And so that's kind of how I started. And then a couple other local restaurants around, and then found some of the guys that are on my YouTube channel now. I found Jeff Hall, I found Sterling Cottam, and my good friend Scott Slusher was already there, and Brenda Andrus that I sing with, like all those folks I met in college, and we did stuff together in college that later I immortalized on YouTube. I'm just like, hey, I know this song with these people, and like they're good, and let's show people what we can do.
So let me pause for something here, because one of the things that I have told folks whenever they listen to this podcast or watch it on YouTube is take notes. And I don't know if you noticed this or not, but Mike just dropped a golden gem for you. He had a song list. He had 100 songs. He said, circle the ones you want, send it up to me, which if people do that, they will often leave you tips. So you were able to earn money while attending college, which, let's face it, for most college students is not something they're able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy for me to think like, I don't know, like even when I'm like learning Beatles songs as a kid in my bedroom, and then learning songs to play at these little gigs, that eventually turned into my career. Like, I'm still using those same songs, stuff I learned on piano as a kid, like Long and Winding Road or Penny Lane or whatever Beatles songs. I now have a Beatles cover band, and I play those songs, professionally, and it's super fun. And so like, it's just kind of cool how it all, for me, just sort of, I thought things I was doing for fun and for a hobby, I turned into a career, and I'm like, yeah, super, super grateful for that.
One other question that I wanted to ask about that along those lines, these first gigs that you were doing at, I guess, the Underground, is that right?
Yeah, and then later the Pier 54 is a pizza place. Yeah.
So when you're doing those gigs, are they on guitar or piano or both?
I kind of I remember when at the Underground, because they had a piano, there were a few gigs where I played some piano, but I mostly focused on guitar. And then I kind of put the piano away for like, I'd say a couple of decades. I didn't really play piano, and I was just playing acoustic guitar and it's kind of funny because one of my first guitars was a Yamaha 12 string, and it was kind of like a $400 guitar. It wasn't anything amazing, but it held its tuning pretty well. And I began using that as my only guitar. And this is what I did to it. I turned it into a 10-string guitar. So it was kind of a hybrid between a 12-string and a 6-string. Okay. The two strings that I removed were the two that kind of jump out at you most as a 12-string sound. I got rid of the octave above the low E, so I could have a low E that I could hit by itself, boom, so it sounded like a 6-string. And then I got rid of that high extra G, the 3rd-string double that's an octave high, because if you take that out, the voicing on the high 3 string sounds normal. And you get doubled B and you get doubled E, and then you get an octave D in there and you get an octave A in there. So it just kind of fills out the sound a little bit. And
wow,
that was
this is really clever. I've never heard that. I've been a guitar player and a guitar teacher for years. I've never heard that. You need to have your own 10-string, man. You need a Televation to make it a 10-string.
That's true.
Hey,
it's totally true.
If the Gallagher boy can have a 3-string guitar and Keith Richards can play a 5-string, Mike Masse can play a 10-string.
Yeah, exactly. And I did kind of the trick that a lot of people said to do with 12 strings, and which was tune it a half step flat and then capo it on the 1st fret. And so it's a little bit looser. It's not quite as tight, so it's a little bit easier on your fingers. The strings are a little bit looser. And then like if you have those flat key songs, you can always take the capo off. There's a little bit of retuning involved, but you're already kind of there, And so I got like for years, it messed with me because for years everything I thought about on guitar was like a half step off, like visually, like like the zero was the first fret. And so I'm like, oh, so I got used to playing with the capo for sure.
So let me ask one other question. When you'd been doing band gigs, right? You were one of the voices, but you didn't have to be the voice, although maybe you talked to the audience. But when you first started doing those solo gigs at the Underground, were you a little nervous about that, just going out there with the acoustic guitar and your voice?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And my ability to communicate with an audience has definitely improved and evolved over time. And like, I would say even in the past 5 years, I've gotten better. Like even like my early days as a professional musician, like when I'm like, we haven't talked about the part where like I was a lawyer for 13 years. I was a public defender in Salt Lake City. We haven't really talked about that, but like I did the lawyer gig for 13 years, and like I started filming my gigs, while I was doing that job. But yeah, I think it was just kind of, for me, it was, I don't know. I'm like diverting myself, my own train of thought, but yeah, I think it's good to have the ability to, I don't know. I'm just losing my train of thought. I'll just let you ask me the next question.
No, it's okay. It's all right, because here's the reason I asked that question. A lot of folks, including myself, played in bands for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden somebody asks us to do a solo gig, or we get invited to do a solo gig, or we just decide to do it. Yeah. And I got to be honest with you, I was a little nervous the first few times I did that, right? And eventually, when you develop the confidence in your voice and your show and your playing and your tunes, you get over that, right?
Yeah. Well, and the way to ease into that is actually to be background music at first. I was background music at first. And so like it was almost bordering on not appropriate for me to be talking a lot. You know what I mean? Like I just need to shut up and play. And so like that takes the pressure off of like, I need to build a rapport with my audience. I'm like, no, they're not your audience. They're the dinner crowd. You can make them your audience by like winning them over, but they're not here to see you. You don't have to like, oh, what's Mike gonna say about this next song? It's like, no, they don't care. They don't know who I am. They're just here to eat, And like, I still maintain that same mentality when I do private gigs, because like on a private function, I'm there to entertain like whatever, corporate world happens to walk into that room. And just because whoever's sponsoring the event, like somebody said, hey, hire that Mike guy, that doesn't mean anybody else in the room knows who I am or cares who I am. So I'm not going to be like talking them up. Hey, everybody, how's it? Like, it's not my job. I'm not the MC. I'm not working the room. I'm just the background music. And at the end of the night, if I'm feeling like, there's been a lot of appreciation, there's, it's not like they're ignoring me, like they're acknowledging my presence. At the end of the night, I'll sometimes say, hey, thanks for listening, everybody. You guys have been great. This is going to be my last song. My name's Mike Masse, just a little thing like that. And then boom, I'm in, And so like, I don't ever interrupt the flow of the evening. I'm not like talking over people's conversations. I'm just literally background music unless people want to sit down and listen. So that's kind of, but what I was going to say, let me back up. I like that train of thought that I lost. What I was going to say about the audience rapport is one of the things that helped me, and like, it was kind of just the awkwardness of it, was when COVID hit and I started doing a lot of live streaming. I was talking to a camera. There's nobody else in the room. And so like I had to get comfortable just like talking about whatever was on my mind in a way that like I'm having a conversation with somebody, and that's the audience. And it's like I can make it personal, like it's like I'm talking to one person and just kind of like, and that helped me when I got back on stage after COVID. I'm just like, I was just looser. I think my gigs are kind of more fun. I'm telling more stories, and not in a way that like detracts from the evening. It's like they're stories about the songs I'm about to play. And they're either stories about me and my connection to that artist, like when I met somebody, like I met Dennis DeYoung or whatever, like that kind of story, or a story about like, I tell stories from Geddy Lee's autobiography, from Bono's autobiography, like musician stories that I've heard, that about the music that like, then I play the song and like, oh, it had more impact because I knew the background, or Mike told me this cool story about it. So like, I think my shows are more like emotionally connecting that way, when it's not just boom, boom, boom music the whole time. And like, I'm not going to say a word, you just listen, So like, I try to just like, I get into a mindset where I can be loose and kind of funny and at least make myself laugh, and also spontaneous. Like you got to be able to react to the audience, because when you set that kind of comfortable tone where you're just like conversationally chatting with, 200 people or whatever that have paid to see you, then sometimes they chat back, and you have to be ready for that. And just to kind of like, give them a little one-liner or whatever. And so it's fun. And it's like, it makes every show different, because that interaction with the audience, some of it's kind of scripted. When I tell a story, I kind of know where the beats are, and I know kind of, how to emphasize certain things. And like, I know what I'm going to say. I don't have to like reinvent the story in my head every time. I kind of use the same wording, and that's fine. That's how shows work. But just the fact that, I also take requests, by the way. Like if it's a solo show, I will take requests from the audience. So like the set lists are always different. I don't even walk into most shows with a set list. Like I have an idea, like I want to do these songs, but I don't know what order I'm going to do them in. And I just totally go with the vibe. I've learned I have over 1,000 songs in my set list now, like in my songbook now. And over half of those I learned during COVID. And so, I doubled the songs I learned. Like I learned more songs in 3 years than I learned in my entire life before that. And so like I have so much music to draw from and so many requests to draw from. I don't remember them all, but I have, I do have an iPad that's, I've got an iPad as a crutch, but some songs I'm like, no, I would need to review that before I attempt it. I'm not just going to practice it in front of you. Like I would need to practice it before I could present it. So like, it's not just like unlimited, but like it makes it kind of fun. And like, I'm always learning new music. I'm doing a live stream on Saturday night. It's my 250th live stream. And I learned 3 new songs this week that I'm going to play for the first time on that stream. So like I'm still always learning new songs, but they're not new, quote unquote, new songs most of the time. They're actually old songs that I just haven't played yet and people haven't heard me sing yet. And so it's kind of fun for them. They're like, oh, I know this song, and oh, Mike sounds good, or whatever, like that's the hope,
Well, let's talk two things. First of all, and the live stream Saturday night will be on YouTube. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just on my channel. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
I don't know if you're gonna post this in time for that to be
relevant. No, unfortunately, this will probably be a little bit after the date. But once that's happened, they can do that. And I'll also mention this. Yeah. I'll mention this again. Your webpage is Mike Masse, MASSE.com. So that's how they can learn about that. Let's go back to the time after college. So you want to get a studio job. There are none, and you decide, wait a minute, I'll just become an attorney. What prompted that?
Well, I guess, it was, a couple things. One was, like, in my mind, when I was a little kid, like, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I'm like, dream job, rock star. Real job, lawyer. And it was like, I was a big Perry Mason fan. So even like, I might have even said like defense attorney, because I really like Perry Mason. I like the whole ethos behind representing people because they have a right to representation, even if they're guilty. Just like that whole, like our system is going to work and we're going to make sure it works. And some people have to do the dirty work of making sure it works. And that's the defense attorneys, like it's not a glamorous job, and they're kind of despised even by their clients half the time, And so public defenders, even worse so, because you're not even picking your own clients. And like a lot of the time people shoot the messenger because they don't want to hear what you have to say. So it's like, it's not the easiest job. And it's a kind of a thankless job, but it's rewarding because you feel like you're doing a version of community service. You're literally like getting in the trenches and helping the people that, had their worst day and their worst moment, or their life, it wasn't always, career criminals by any stretch. It was mostly first time offenders that you're just trying to get them right back on the path. And anyway, so that was the day job.
Where did you go to law school, by the way?
I went to law school BYU. So like, So the other reason I became a defense attorney was Jeff Hall. Jeff Hall is one of my main collaborators on my YouTube channel. Anyone who's seen my YouTube channel knows who Jeff Hall is. Yes. And they love Jeff Hall because he's great. He was my bass player, and he has kind of more of a baritone voice. So he would do a lot of the harmonies with me and kind of fill out the sound. And like, he would kind of carry the low end, both vocally and instrumentally. That was kind of his thing, and he did a great job. And we sounded good together, and we, this is something that people don't know about, they're maybe surprised to hear that I played at the Pie Pizzeria for 15 years before I started filming my gigs. And so like, I started filming in 2008. I had already been playing there for 15 years. And so like, I'm showing you, like, I'm capturing on video seasoned arrangements, and seasoned performances with Jeff Hall. Like we've been doing it a while. He hadn't always been doing it with me regularly, but like a lot of the songs we captured, we've been doing for a while. So that was, I don't want people to think we just walked in and just say, oh, we nailed it. Like, no, it's like, I would pick the songs we nailed each night. I would post the highlights. I wouldn't post the entire gig because there'd be an equal number of songs that we kind of botched, So it's like, I'm giving you the best, So like, don't have any illusions and don't get discouraged. Like, I can't play like Mike Masse. Like, well, I can't either half the time, and when I do, I post it, So it's fine. But anyway, so Jeff Hall was a public defender and then became a prosecutor. He went to law school before I did. And I started law school when he was graduating from law school. I took a little bit of time off and he had a head start on me. And so he helped me kind of actually get my job as a public defender. He kind of put in a good word for me. And so I was kind of sort of following in his footsteps in a way. And then eventually when we were playing together at the Pi, I worked there for 13 years as a public defender. And he was a prosecutor that whole time. So it was a prosecutor and a public defender, like making music together. And because we were friends long before we were ever, on the opposite side of yeah.
Let me mention this for a moment. My college roommate is an attorney. I've known lots of attorneys. And in fact, if you had been in my high school civics class the fall of my senior year, I'm living in Raleigh, North Carolina. My goal at the time was to go to Duke Law School.
Nice.
So I understand all of this.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney. I mean, those are the stuff of TV shows, Mike.
I know, right? Yeah.
So were you able to play while you were, let's face it, for those of you that have never been to college and or law school, college is challenging. Law school is difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially that first year of law school. Right. But did you continue to, I mean, obviously you had the grades to go, from the undergrad to law school, but were you continuing to play while you were in law school too?
Yeah. And I would just like the Pi for the longest time. I mean, I get occasional private gigs here and there. People that heard me at the Pi, like, hey, can you play my wedding or whatever? I'm like, sure. But for the most part, the Pi was my gig. And even after I became an attorney, like the Pi was my gig. And I did it once a month. At first, it was 2 nights in a row, Monday, Tuesday. It wasn't even a weekend. Like they were too busy to have you play on a weekend because they needed the corner for the tables. Like, because they cleared out a couple of corners for the live music. So like, it wasn't even a weekend. It was like the nights they were the most empty. So that's why, like on some of my videos, there's kind of like sporadic applause. It's just like, well, there weren't a lot of people there, and we didn't care. We were playing like by that time we were playing for the camera. Like we're playing for YouTube. But yeah. So we would play twice a month, and it was Monday, Tuesday. And then after a while I told the Pi, I'm just like, I'm just gonna do once a month. I'm not gonna do Mondays. I'm not doing 2 nights in a row. They're like, that's cool. And so I scaled it back to just literally 1 night a month. And in my mind, that was enough where I wouldn't like forget all the music I'd learned. It's just enough to keep me going. And like there were probably years, I'm not exaggerating, years that went by where the only day of the month I touched my guitar was for my Pi gig. Like I wouldn't play in between. I just I was busy, And then I even got, I'll confess, like after at some point, maybe after law school, maybe during, no, more like after. It was after. I got into gaming a little bit on the PC, so it was like I had gaming as a distraction, so I wasn't as devoted to music as my sole hobby or whatever. And so, but then I recorded a few originals in that time period, just wanted to get them down, and so that's kind of what I was focusing on, and then, I started recording the Pi gigs, and I got to the point where I could record the audio and make it sound nice. I'm like, this is nice. And I'm like, well, it'd be kind of cool to have some video to go with it. And so I just got a cheap video camera. And that was actually my sister's suggestion. My sister, Michelle in Vegas, she's like, I came over one Christmas or whatever, and she invited a couple friends over. She's like, can you bring your guitar? My friends want to hear you sing. Because she played my music when her friends came over, and she passed out my CDs to them. And so I had like this little following amongst her friends. And she's like, can you come play for my friends? I'm like, yeah. And then so like while I'm doing that, in the middle of that, she's like, you should start a YouTube channel. I'm just like, all right. And then like my first thought is, well, there's that necessary evil of video, but apart from that, why not? Yeah. So
I think every musician in the world, first of all, when they hear themselves recorded the first time, they're extremely disappointed. I asked Kyle Henderson, an old friend who was the bass player, one of the lead singers for a band called The Producers on Epic Records in the early 80s, what his first experience in the recording studio was like. He said, I was catatonic. And I think most of us hate our voices. I certainly went through that, and I think a lot of people do. But eventually you get to a point where you realize, hey, this is my voice. This is what it sounds like. I can do this to improve. I can do that to improve, right?
And that's when I'm mixing my own voice, including like EQ, compression, and trying to get a good sound, a recorded sound of my voice. That's pretty much like it's my unspoken mindset. I'm just like, how can I get to the point where I hate it the least?
Wow.
So yeah, It's just like where it bothers me the least, where I'm like, I can tolerate it, it's just like, it's not, and I'm always like, I don't want the recording itself to make it any worse. It's like, let the performance contain all of the weakness. I don't need the recording to like add to the weakness of the sound. So yeah, I try to like, it's kind of my mission to try to make myself recorded sound as well as I can, or good as I can. But like, it's hard sometimes. I go back and listen to my catalog, what I've done the past 10 years since I've been a full-time musician, and there's some mixes I'm just like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, that sounds terrible. Like there's a few of my mixes I'm just like, no. I'm like, I want to go back and fix that, and sometimes I do. I have it on a couple occasions. I'm like, no, I can't let that stand. No.
I get it.
And so it gets working too fast sometimes, just working too fast. And like, and your ears get tired. You don't go back and check it later. And you're like, oh, wait, that was not what I thought it was. Anyway. Yeah.
Sounded kind of gnarly, right? I get that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. When you're performing solo shows, just you and the guitar, what's the best part of that for you?
The best part of that for me is when it's a song I love and I am just catching a ride on the energy of that song. And I'm just like, and the song it's like a radio channel in my head. And it stops in front of me. I jump on at the beginning of the song and I ride it to the end and I get off. And I'm just like, I'm riding that energy and I'm just like channeling it through me, the filter of Mike Masse. But I'm just like, this is what I'm hearing in my head. And this is like, I'm trying to share it with you. I hope you like it because it's fun to do. That's kind of like, that's the whole thing. That's it.
I think that's a fabulous way to look at it, because if you can get to a point where you're not playing the song, maybe the song's playing you. Would that be fair?
Yeah. And I had somebody like, I don't know, it's kind of weird, but yeah, I think it's like, I think there's something spiritual about it that's like where you're channeling some kind of energy that's just out there, that like whatever energy originally inspired that music and brought it out of that original artist is still there for the taking. It's still there. And it's just like, it's just tuning into it. And it's not just like, it's not some meditation you have to do. It's literally practice. It's practice to the point where it can just flow through you and you're not thinking about it anymore. And you're just like, I mean, maybe you're thinking about what's the next lyric, but you're not like, how do I do this? You're not constantly like, how do I do this? How do I do this? What happens next? You're like, maybe, you need some little cues for the actual structure of the song or whatever. But like, that's the thing that I don't really have the luxury of, is like, I don't go on long tours where I'm playing the same 20 songs every night, where they're just so burned in my brain, where it's just like so automatic. There are some songs for me where I'm not looking at a chart anymore. Maybe it's there in front of me as a crutch, but like, I'm not looking at it. But like, I just wish I had that familiarity with like so many more songs, but I just don't have the time. Like there's not enough performances in my life to get good at all of the songs I would like to be good at that level. And when I say good at, I'm just talking about the repetition. Because there's no substitute for repetition when you're a musician. There's no shortcuts. There's nothing better than repetition. And so you have to spend the time. And if you don't, you're not going to be as prepared when you get on stage, and you're going to feel it, and it's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your performance. It's going to affect your connection with the audience. You may do it flawlessly, but you may be, staring at a chart while you're doing it. So it's not the same performance visually. And I know when I've done that, like there's times when I've done that. Like, I don't know the song very well. People want to hear it. It just got requested. I'm going to play it anyway. I'm going to be looking at my chart, but it's going to sound fine, but I'm not going to be like, making eye contact, and so it's just a lesser level of performance. And so like, the more you can get it in your head where it's just, muscle memory, as they say, and just kind of into your subconscious, then you can truly start to perform rather than just play.
This is tremendous input. So we're going to wrap up episode 1, and I have a set of notes. Now, you must understand that I don't normally take notes before I do any of these podcasts. I want to fly by the seat of my pants. I want to catch you and me and just kind of see where things go. But I have so many things to ask that we'll do that for the second episode. So this is the end of episode 1 of my podcast with Mike Masse. Again, I'm Riley Wilson for the Band of One podcast. If you like this episode, please be sure to like and share it and subscribe. If you've got ideas for upcoming podcasts, you can always get in touch with me through our Facebook page, which is Band of One Podcast, or you can email me directly off my music site, which is riley@guitarmadesimpler.com. Thanks, and see you next time.